Yes, there are risks involved with artificial intelligence. There are risks involved with any technology. And the idea that we develop technology to outperform us in some way is actually nothing new. All technology that we have developed so far in humankind's history has meant to outperform us in something, flying, speed, keeping in information, whatever kind of thing. So it's not really like there is very much different in what we are seeing now in the development of artificial intelligence that we have not seen in the development of other technologies. But indeed, we have to do it responsibly. And that is the work that I'm doing and that many of us are doing within and without the high-level expert group on AI, which, by the way, the document you are referring to is a draft, which in many, many places says, please, we are not really completely sure about this. Give us more input on it. So many of the quotations you referred to were meant very much as drafts and not as the opinion of the group as a whole. Anyway, let's continue with the responsible artificial intelligence. Why should we care about responsible artificial intelligence? I think Ola already gave a lot of the issues. It is because of all the risks, but it's also because it is potentially a technology we can do a lot of good, and we have to make sure that this good is available for everybody and anyone which would need it. What we shouldn't forget is that AI is designed by us, is an artifact, is something that we decide when or not to deploy and to develop and how we want to develop it or not, including all these stories about singularity and superintelligence and development of systems which will learn by themselves and will start doing all kinds of strange things like developing paperclips and other kind of things. All those things start by human decisions and human designs and human developments. So what we have to make sure, even if we don't really know how the system will exactly develop, we need to put in place the clarity of the purpose about the system, make very clear to the system what is the purpose that we really want, and also put in position all the checks and controls and the mechanisms to verify and to monitor the systems as we develop it. And that is because the system itself doesn't have the capabilities to really understand what we want. We can do that in many ways. The ways which I have been looking at include taking responsibility by looking at the process by which we develop the systems. It's the responsibility in design. Also by looking at the results of those systems and how those results of the systems can be aligned with our ethical principles and our moral values in the behavior of the systems themselves, and include also the study and the analysis about our own responsibility as designers, as policymakers, as users, as society in general, as we develop and use and apply these systems. So in my presentation, I will look at all these 3 points one by one. Taking the idea of ethics in design or responsibility in design. It's actually not very much than old-fashioned software engineering done properly. It's about doing the right thing, doing it right, understanding what are the values behind the system, and ensuring that the system is designed indeed for all, and that is clear with benefits and with influence. AI is more than machine learning. We are at this moment seeing a lot of developments and a lot of results coming from very specific type of techniques in machine learning, especially techniques who have the potential and are able to use the current availability of lots of data and lots of computational power to perceive the environment, to make perceptions about the environment and generate patterns out of those perceptions, and use those patterns to suggest or to act in a way which is in accordance to the patterns that we saw. Patterns and data are by definition about the past. We don't have never data about the future. AI is not a crystal ball and is not something magic which is able to identify the future. But what we are seeing now, and it's the extrapolation, sometimes a bit too far, of the possibility to take results of the past and extrapolate and make indications to the future. It works as long as the future is not very far different from the past, but if we see really big changes, the approach that we take there is not always the most useful. But AI is more than that. It's also about interaction with people, about the techniques and the methods and the models in which we enable systems to interact with us. We enable these systems to use and to enter our own environments, be it in houses, in the workforce, in the streets. It's about all those techniques. It's about the systems interacting with each other as well. And it's also about the issue of autonomy. And by autonomy, I will come back later, but in autonomy, it's about the activity, the possibility for the systems to act independently of a direct influence or input from a user or another system. We need to do it right, and to do it right is about, if we are talking about autonomy, it comes with responsibility. The more things we are able to do autonomous, the more, or our systems are more are able to do autonomous, the more we are responsible for what those systems do, because the system itself is a machine, and machines, plastic and wires and software cannot be held responsible for nothing. We can. It's about interaction with these systems, and to be able to interact, we also have to be able to be accountable. In the case of systems, accountability has to do with the possibilities to explain, to justify what is done, and also to be able to link the design of the system with our values. I would contend that optimal AI is not the most efficient or the most quick or the most fast or the whatever, is AI that is explainable. If we have a system which does a lot of wonderful stuff and is always right on the kind of results that it gives, but it cannot explain why it is giving any of those results, it's not a system that we would want to live. And of course, there are also many ways, we have to realize that there are many ways to design systems, there are many ways to take all issues into account. There is not one right way. The right way has to do with the context, with the designers, with the options that we consider, with a lot of other influence, so a lot of other issues. So we really need to make sure that we are explicit about the choices and the values that we took into account. It's about responsibility, and responsibility has indeed to do with autonomy, has to do with our responsibility, like I say. So we need to be clear about a chain of responsible actors, which which are part of the responsible chain. So all designers, developers, manufacturers, buyers, sellers, users, policymakers, all have some part in this responsibility. And it's also to do with the autonomy of the system. And indeed, we are striving, or we are calling these systems autonomous. But we have to realize, what do we mean by autonomy here? We don't really expect the car to take this type of decisions. We also don't expect, or are not designing the weapons to take this type of decisions. We are designing the car to find out the best way to take us to wherever we want to go. We don't want the car to determine for us where we should be going. And it's also about the responsibility that we have for developing systems which look and act like humans. Humanoids, those chatbots, which we'll also refer to, in many cases might be important and relevant to design systems and develop systems who really look like humans, but in many cases it's not. And we have to be very aware of the potential for misleading of with whom we are talking about, the interactions with the different types of people which might not be able to understand the difference, whether they are talking to a machine or to a system. So we have to take, I'm not saying that we cannot or shouldn't at all, and I don't think so, develop human-like AI, but we have to be very aware and very responsible for what we are doing. And it also has to do with transparency. And transparency is not only about the algorithm, which is a lot of the discussions which have to do with making algorithm transparent. It might be in some cases not possible. With the current techniques that we use for deep learning, it's not really possible to make those systems transparent, but it has much more to do with our choices, with the process that we take to design the systems, with the data that we use, and with the choices that we make. Because in any design, we have to make choices. And if we don't make those choices explicit, we don't really know what the system was meant to be doing, even. And if we don't really make clear what was the data that we used for training and for using the system, where that data comes from, how that data is being managed and interpreted, all those issues have to do with transparency, and it contributes much more to the understanding and the optimality of the system than maybe really trying to make algorithms that are explainable. So this is about the process, what we should do about designing the systems. But now, can we build systems which would react and act ethically? And that's a whole discussion about self-driving cars who can decide themselves ethically whether they should kill the old lady in the left or the two kids in the right, or whatever other kinds of strange stories that go around about the design of those cars. What does it mean? What does it mean when we want to build systems that act ethically? And if we would be able to do that, what do we need to do it? We probably need to first understand our own ethics and agree, all of us, in what is the ethical thing to do. And that we have been trying for many millions of years, and we are not really there yet. So I think the best we can obtain with trying to look at ethics of systems is which will lead us to understand better our own ethics. It's about the systems being able to use ethics and to be ethical. But and all these issues are very complex. There is no recipe or no research yet hardly about this type of issues. There are attempts, there are some kind of prototypes, but the idea is that what we do is we start with a certain value. For instance, let me go a bit quicker, the value of fairness, and we try to build systems which are fair. And what actually we do, we interpret this concept, which is a very abstract and very meaning a lot of different things for different people in different situations, and we interpret it all the way down to some kind of formula of equation, which is included in the code of the systems. And it's about this interpretation system moving from the values to the norms that represent these values to the functionalities that we implement directly into the code. This is where we really have to take into account our part and our responsibility on the system. So if I talk about fairness, I can imagine that different people of you will have another image in your mind. We can think about fairness as being equal resources. If we have here 10 people and 10 chocolates, we would divide one chocolate for every people, and that would be fair. But maybe there are people who have never had chocolate before, so maybe we could give all those chocolates to the people who had never had chocolate before. They have the opportunity now to have more chocolates. And that depends, so in the context, in our interpretations, in our decisions, which of these definitions of fairness we would take in that case. If my system, which I could build, it was not a program, but it was about my building blocks were boxes, I could define that as being I give one box to each kid, or I give some kids more boxes. The consequence of this can be quite different. And depending on how we build the systems, we might build systems which are indeed implementing fairness in a way that it's adapted and it's aligned with what the context is about, or we might be building systems which are not so aligned with what we would need to do. The issue here is that fairness, we talk then about fair systems, but we don't know, or in many cases we lose the information about the interpretation of what fairness is about and how did we, at the end of the day, implement the system. So these are the kind of issues which contribute much more to understand how a system behaves ethically, and that's the kind of issues we really need to have more research about. Now, finally, about the ethics for the designers. It has to do with, indeed, with regulation. It has also to do with certification. We cannot expect everybody and anybody to understand what AI systems do, in the same way that I don't understand if I go to the supermarket, what is the difference between two eggs, which one is classified as being fair trade and the other one is classified as being a battery egg. If I look at those eggs, I have myself, and probably most of you, no way to understand why one should be much more expensive than the other one and why you have that fair trade label there. It's the same, I think, with AI systems. In many cases, we will not be able ourselves to understand what are the values and the purpose and the ways that those systems have been developed. We really need certification agencies and mechanisms which help us understand what type of values and purpose are behind those systems. And then we can start about thinking about fair trade AI systems or organic AI systems or whatever else all those types of labels would give us. But it's also about standards. We are building AI systems like they are kind of art. We forgot kind of the engineering steps behind it. And if we really want to be able to integrate and to understand and to regulate these systems, we also need to have standards about how to build and how to integrate certain types of issues into the systems. And finally, is about the codes of conduct of the ones who use, regulate, and introduce those systems in different countries or different places. And indeed, in this area, there is many work being done, not only by the high-level expert group, which come up with this draft with a lot of ideas, a lot of suggestions, of which we got over 500 pieces of comment, and some of those pieces of comment were longer than the document itself. So we are now having a hard time to go through all those comments of everybody and all the. We are very grateful. It shows that it was something which was really needed and necessary and well received by everybody, even the ones who were very critical on what we did. We are integrating that, and on the 8th of April, I think, or somewhere beginning of April, we'll come up with the final, or at least the next version of this document. Next to that, we are also going to work on the investment and policy strategies for Europe. We are not a regulating body, we are an advisory body. So what we are going to do is provide suggestions to the European Union, to the European Parliament, which are changing at this moment, so we don't really know what our suggestions will end up where. But that is the task that we got, to give this type of investment and policy strategies to ensure that the impact of AI, and the impact of AI in Europe is going to be beneficial for all people in Europe, but also to ensure that Europe can have an impact on AI development. And I don't really like to talk about AI races. There is no race in AI. For a race, the first part of the definition of a race is that there is a finish line. We don't have a finish line in the development of AI. We have also, like I said, many different ways of deal with AI, and just blindly following other countries who are investing heavily and solely on deep learning approaches is probably not the best thing for us as Europeans to do, because our strengths in AI development have since ever been in robotics, in interactions, in formal methods. And there we are still the leading parties in Europe. We are still in the world. We are still the part of the world who develops and trains the most AI PhD students, more than China, more than the United States at this moment. We are not able to keep them in Europe for many cases, but that's probably where we have to work. So I'm not really worried about the position of AI in Europe, as long as we don't go blindly following what the other ones are doing, but really consider what is important to develop AI, which is trustworthy, responsible, and human-centered, and what kind of issues we can put and utilize and count on the type of backgrounds that we have done, that we are strong in Europe. But there are many more groups looking at creating regulations about AI. There are declarations on AI development and principles more than what you can try to read. They grow every day that you try to find this type of declarations. There is very little work being done from the declarations about this is our principles about AI into really putting those principles into practice. And I think that in Europe we are there, again, leading that type of development, not only about declaring stuff, but also trying to see what does it mean to declare these things and how we have to put them in practice. So there are many initiatives in Europe which are, and in the world, which try to put these things in practice. There are also all countries, many countries and many organizations have come up with their strategies and positions. Tim Dutton is trying to keep a list of all the countries and all the strategies, and I think he's losing the war, the race against the time, because every time they come more, it goes quicker than what he can update his webpage. But there is in that webpage all lists of national strategies from the different countries, and every time more are coming. During the 2019, all European countries are supposed to come with their own national strategies. So, but to finalize, my main message is that we have to be aware that AI influences and is influenced by our systems, by our society, by the way we do things. That while we design systems, it's never value neutral. We put our values and our principles implicit or explicitly into the systems. And my message is that we better do that explicitly as much as we can. That optimal AI is AI that we can explain and that we can trust. And we are the ones who build these systems. We set the limits, we set the principles and the purpose for these systems. We are responsible. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes?
2 questions down there.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Ratcliffe, I'm from KTH, and you gave a very positive view here, saying we are responsible. I think in some way that technology is already running far ahead of us. If you just take the example of the mobile telephone, it wasn't thought of that everybody could use it. Those who are blind cannot use it. Those many things you can say, and it just goes on. Mm. So what do you say about that, that we are responsible because all the technology is running much faster than all these groups thinking about it?
I don't think yes, we are responsible to make sure that technology addresses all of us, and we are not taking our responsibility every time in the way we should do it, but still we are responsible for the technology. If we are building telephones which are not able to be used by blind people or by other ones, we should make sure, as the developers of this technology, that we make those types of difference, that we include everybody. Like I say in one of slides, the design is not only designed for our principles, but should be designed that include all of us. So we should be able and should put the effort and the money on the development of technology that really address and is usable for all of us. But if we are not responsible, who is? There is no one else responsible for what we are doing. We are responsible for what we did with the use of fuel, mineral fuels so far, and we are responsible for solving and trying to solve the environmental problems that we have now. We are responsible. We cannot expect the system or the AI super intelligence to be the ones who are going to solve the problem for us.
Yeah. There was another question.
Oh. So my name is Daniel Akinine.
Don't forget to say who you are.
So I'm Daniel Akinine. I'm the CTO of Microsoft here in Sweden. So I had a couple of questions. So you were mentioning different tools to kind of regulate this area. So there is code of conduct, you could do certifications, you could do standards, international standards as well. And all of this stuff is kind of starting to happen right now.
Yeah, that's true.
But do you see, the problem is also that they are working independent of each other. So they're creating code of conducts, which is not necessarily linked to the... So do you see any, recommendations for a process of this area? Should you start with something?
Yes. indeed, there are many activities and many agencies working on all those type of. I tried to summarize some of them. It's true. It shows a bit the importance and awareness that it's really happening right now in the last 1 year, a little bit more than 1 year. It's really an explosion in awareness about the ethical issues around AI, about the consequences and the impact of AI. It's part of this explosion of awareness that all over the place there are initiatives happening. I don't think that we should start too soon putting those initiatives together, because we will need really to have different solutions, different things to choose from, to identify which ones will be the ones who are more likely to be able to be used widely. But I also think that we will need to take into account contexts, societal context, cultural context, regional contexts, and that solutions cannot be a one-size-fits-all, but they have to be adapt to different types of situations and contexts. But there is increasingly the awareness between these organizations that we should be talking to each other. And I myself sit in many of them, so.
Men är inte, I just want to add, isn't it very important that we talk to each other about this? Otherwise we might end up with a set of principles, and the principles are so many and so broad and wide that we can do more or less anything.
Yes.
This is what happened within bioethics.
Yes.
We have principles that are contradicting, but they allow us to do more or less if we stick to them. So we have to sort of sit down, try to focus on the very basic ethical principles and ideas here that should...
That's definitely an issue, but like I say, we are maybe at too early in the development to be able to start fixing now what are, for once and forever, the principles that we want to take. We really need to let different approaches and different views arise, and from there learn what would be the best. I'm not really sure whether we come up with universal set of ethical principles. I'm not a philosopher myself. I believe that that's what philosophers and ethicists have been trying to do for the last 10,000 years.
And succeeded.
Yes and no, because different parts of the world will have different opinions on that. But I think that we need to give it more time, maybe not 10,000 years, but a little bit more time to be able to understand what are the differences. Also taking into account the global south, the eastern and western approaches to it.
A final question.
So it's one ties to Elizabeth's concern. Right. We do have systems that are very complex, that consist of both machines and people, like Facebook, and regulation have failed terribly. Right. So this is a more complex system. It is less transparent in many cases. So the risks are a lot higher. So what I would like to see is what in security is called the adversarial or malicious model. Where we expect that people develop software and machines that will not follow these rules. That is the threat, right? So when everything is fine, it's a great plan, right? But this is not what terrorists and other some nation-state actors will do. They will totally ignore it.
No, that's true, but that's true, and of course people will use systems, and any system, any hammer that you develop can be used for good or for bad. That is not something which it's inherent in the technology and in the people that use this technology. Indeed, the most complex, the systems themselves are not the complex parties. The individual people themselves are probably also not the complex parties, but like what Daniel Kahneman says, is the relationships who are very complex. And once you put all people and all systems together, things get very, very, very complex. But still, and I believe, and I do agree that we should take many different types of approaches and models and methods to deal with it. And indeed, adversarial tests and risk assessments are part of it, which maybe are not in this version of my slides, but is something which I often refer to. So we do have to take many different approaches, from very theoretical to very societal, and very from all types of disciplines. We need to have all these approaches together, but still my message keeps the same. We are the ones, we people are responsible for the systems that we use and for the ways we use these systems. And we are responsible also for ensuring that the systems in our environment are used in the ways that we think they are the best. We can solve the Facebook problem. We just turn off Facebook. It's up to us. It's the decisions that we make. Yes. Yeah. We can turn off the internet. It's the balance, what I was saying, we cannot have it all. And if we want to have Facebook and if we want to have internet, we also have to be able to deal with the moral dilemmas that come from that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.